Hey, it's Earth Day, and in our world we have a surplus of oil. There's also a lack of demand for oil because of what the pandemic has created. So the price for barrels of oil has actually gone under $0. And I think that a nice president from Mother Earth this year might be to stop drilling for oil. And then a president in the future could be reducing our reliance on oil so that we don't have to drill as much. But I wrote something down about vaccination last week, and as we were going through the weekend, because last week we hit the peak of cases, and there was just, there was a lot of deaths last week, and the air was already heavy with so much things going on. I thought I really didn't want to create this video and share it. This week, we should be coming down from the curve. It's not happening quickly. There still are a lot of new cases per day, so hopefully that will start to reduce. But there's still a lot of news going on, still a lot of fear and panic about the pandemic that's being pushed by the media. There's one group who decided that they would try and stand up a little bit against it. And while I like their spirit, the folks that are out there petitioning and protesting and rallying against the stay-at-home orders, they're kind of showing a little bit of their ignorance and their bad decision making, because it doesn't matter if you're not afraid of the virus. It still can very easily affect you, and when you're in groups like that, that's where it tends to spread. So if there's someone that has it there, it will spread more. So their efforts of what they're doing out there might actually backfire on them, because they'll spread the virus to each other, and then more cases, and then more of a public health risk. And so the stay-at-home orders will proceed. And they're, petitioning is a little bit misplaced, because there's some things that are going on that are a little bit more under the radar that are certainly troubling. Dr. Fauci, whether it was intended or unintended, said he wouldn't mind if in the United States we never shook hands again. That's an attack on our heritage and our culture. Like I said, whether it's intended or unintended, there's some significant problems that I have with that statement. Maybe that's for another video. You have some nonsense about having a biometric ID so that we can track people around, and maybe we haven't ever learned anything from the past, or don't learn anything from the past. But after a tragic event in early 2000s, there was this thing that came out called the Patriot Act. And we've probably forgotten how easily these things that seem to be put in place during these times to protect us can be easily taken advantage of and abused. And then, of course, mandatory vaccination for coronavirus is something that will be on our doorstep after most of the cases go away and people recover from them. So I wanted to ask the question several weeks ago, and I did to some friends. If there was a vaccination, would you get it? The reason being is because I knew that there would be pressure from without to suggest getting the vaccine. I had the same answer then as I do now. This conversation, for practical purposes, is probably not necessary, because it's not very likely that a vaccine would be ready by next year if we have to deal with the coronavirus again. And even if it's ready, there wouldn't be enough for every American to be vaccinated. So people with compromised immune systems, if it would be safe for them to get it, they would be the people, of course, if they choose to do so, would be the people that should be first given it. But before that, I want to address the premise for why people put pressure on you to get vaccinated, before I talk about the reasons that I've come to my conclusion about vaccination. The argument goes that if you don't get vaccinated, then you're putting others at risk to get the virus, and that means that you don't care about the health or well-being of others. And I would like to propose the idea that as Americans, we don't care about the health and well-being of others in general. I don't mean to say this in a crude or crass way and incite stress or anger, but I mean to say it in a thoughtful and honest way that can lead to discussion and maybe some change. There's a great therapy session going on between Zoom meetings and company commercials across our country. There's never been a better time to be humble and giving than now, thinking about the needs of others around you. And then I think about the reality of the 21st century. And I think, is this the reality that we live in? Is this the reality that we'll return to? We're currently dealing with a problem that we've never faced before. So in our effort to cope with it, we're relying on each other. This is a good thing. It's why you contact family members and reconnect with old friends. These are the relationships that you can trust in and have strong value. But coping and dealing with a problem versus living our values in society can be two very different things. I feel the desire that people have to return to a reality that we can control, and how our intellect might tell us that getting a vaccine might be the fastest way to get there. I think that this is a big part of the reason why people are thinking about vaccination over the needs of others. Now, I sat and thought about how to illustrate the selfishness of our society in the 21st century. And believe me, it wasn't that hard to imagine. But I thought I'd spare you the negative details and simply ask you a few questions that are probing, and then make a few observations of how we handle the coronavirus. Question 1. When is the last time that you called your grandparents or visited a loved one in a retirement community, or went to a retirement community that didn't have a loved one in to visit? As the elderly are the people who have the highest chances of a negative health risk from the virus. Question 2. When's the last time that you donated your time, energy, or money to a cause that helped less fortunate and didn't go to help your kids or family? Because we know that the poor and the needy are disproportionately affected in times of crisis. I see this vision of us, in a month or two from now, re-entering into society. I see us going out for coffee with the neighbor or someone from work, or to go get a beer. Maybe even to go to dinner with a family member that you haven't been able to see in some time. I see businesses coming back to work, and I see money flooding back into the economy. And I see some of the ways that we have adapted to live in a stay-at-home or quarantine type world. I see those being removed, and I see us going back to our old ways. I've long said that I believe the two biggest problems in our society are individualism and consumerism. It can probably be traced back to pride and greed. These problems manifest themselves in different ways throughout our society. The ways that they've shown themselves during coronavirus is blaming, division, hoarding, shaming, to name a few. When the crisis is over, they'll go back to more subtle forms like gossip, envy, overindulgence, and strife. One of my favorite bands puts it this way: if the world was how it could be, maybe I could get some sleep. If the needs of others aren't a motivation for our actions, we'll need to make some major changes to our values. I think this will be especially true after the pandemic. We can wear rose-colored glasses right now and think that our intentions are inspired by the needs of others, but I don't think that those will serve us. We're in it together right now, but the first chance we get to go it alone, we're gonna make like a banana and split. If you don't want to take my word for it, there was this quote that I came across and shared on Facebook, and it's by Brene Brown. So after I shared it, I said I should probably know who this is, so I looked her up, and she's the chair at the University of Houston's Graduate School for Graduate College of Social Work, and she has her doctorate in social work. She is a professor, author, and speaker. She's well known for her TED Talks, they have over 40 million views, and I was one of them. Her topics on the TED Talks are courage, shame, vulnerability, and empathy. So the quote goes like this: "We will not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal, other than we normalized greed, inequality, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We should not long to return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature." There are some big things that we need to change in there. At the end of his book, Viktor Frankl, in Man's Search for Meaning, puts it this way: "The world is in a bad state, but everything will become still worse unless each of us does his best." There's some changes that I think need to happen to our values and the way that we live them out if we want to think that our actions are helping going towards the well-being and the health of others. So if I can still care for the health and well-being of others without getting the vaccine, and part of the motivation for getting a vaccine might just simply to return to normal, what are some reasons that I might not want to get it? Have you heard of this one? This exterior membrane that serves as a protective layer to keep bacteria and viruses from entering our body. It heals itself by regenerating it and adapts to changes in our body. And virtually every person on Earth has this. What pharma company developed it, you might ask? Well, that would be Mother Nature herself and or God himself. What I'm talking about is your skin. And it's not even an upgrade. It comes standard. You can't get coronavirus through your skin. The virus is contracted through your mouth, nose, or eyes. So we already have this amazing protective feature, and it's purely natural. How about this one? You've had to hear about this one. It's this hidden system that functions to detect and defend foreign adversaries like disease. It acts again on its own accord, but works to keep your body healthy. It even produces antibodies to create an immunity towards certain infections. What pharma company makes this, you might wonder? You're right, it was Mother Nature herself and or God himself, both of which didn't cost money but are intrinsically valuable. So other than having great defenses that are part of our very selves, you have to forgive me that I'm not quick to trust the industry that caused the last epidemic in our country, the opioid epidemic. We sat idly by as our friends and family members were dying, and drug companies said opioids wouldn't become addictive. Then they pumped the markets full of them. Doctors prescribed them, and they were pushed through pharmacy. For 20 years, since 1999, about 450,000 people in the U.S. died from the opioid overdoses. The number ebbs and flows, and recent years have been worse, with about 40,000 people dying per year of an opioid overdose. And now you're starting to talk about, in our country, coronavirus is the leading cause of death, and it probably will be this year. But you're starting to talk about a very close number from a problem that came from the pharmaceutical industry. And if you need any evidence, right now the people responsible are finally being brought to court, and they'll face steep prison sentences, and they deserve it because of the fraud and malpractice. Above and beyond the opioid epidemic, looking at the pharmaceutical industry, you see a lot of money being spent without the results that you'd hope for. it's hard to say in America if people are getting healthier. You can obviously see, especially in the 20th century, increase in the age of life, which is steady and has a lot to do with modern medicine, which has been very helpful. The quality of life is a harder thing to quantify, but the same amount of people are on prescription drugs, and much more money from the pharmaceutical company is going into research and development, but revenues are up considerable amount, as with profits, much higher than under other industries. It may have to do with the fact that drugs treat the symptoms and not the problems. The healthcare industry is in cahoots with pharma because that's where the money comes from, their money comes from, along with the federal government. And if you don't want to take my word for it, there's federal studies on it from the U.S. Accountability Office. And the largest pharmaceutical companies in our country are currently facing an antitrust lawsuit that, above all, asserts price fixing and also depriving the industry of competition. So, no, I don't believe that the pharmaceutical industries have the health and well-being of Americans in mind. To bring this back to coronavirus, Brett Giroir, the federal that has been appointed by Donald Trump to oversee the testing efforts, he, is an example of what I'm talking about. He's educated at Harvard and the University of Texas Southwest Medical Center. In 2004, he was working, in a military organization. They were trying to be able to get ventilators that they can take into war areas. But more specifically, his work from 2008 to 2015 at the University of Texas A&M. He was the head of a division there that was in charge of creating a vaccine manufacturing center. And in 2015, Texas A&M got a new president, and Giroir was basically in a meeting where he said that he had 30 minutes to resign or he's going to be fired. Now, why did that happen? It's because his vaccine manufacturing center, which was touted to be, would become the largest and most capable center in the world and be able to solve the pandemic crisis, well, it didn't quite prove fruitful, according to GlaxoSmithKline, who removed themselves from the project after the federal grants were taken from it. And you have federal grants that are going into the research of this, and what ended up happening is this gentleman, he overpromised and underdelivered. The problem that I have with this is the federal research grants, and he used this as a reason that he shouldn't have been let go by the university, but he said that he increased the federal research grants to the university by 65%. So you have federal money going into this work that GlaxoSmithKline didn't find to be fruitful and was overpromised and undelivered. Now, this guy, after several years, and he was, he said he was upset because they were trying to do something there where they were changing the way vaccines were created. It didn't pan out. He lost that job in 2015. He was appointed to several positions by Donald Trump. And this person who overpromised and underdelivered is now running a federal huge effort for the testing for coronavirus in our country. So those folks who think that the medical science industry doesn't have anything to do with, is bipartisan, and you can trust everyone and all the research, and doesn't have to do anything with the federal government, you should look at the way that they get these grants. And there's a lot that goes into getting the grants, and at the end of the day, it becomes taxpayers' money who pays for this. And so, yes, I think that they should be responsible to us when they overpromise and underdeliver. And it's another reason why I think you can say that the healthcare system and the pharmaceutical companies that are a large part of that healthcare system don't always have the interest of people in mind. They sometimes have the interest of profits. I think that there's also an environmental argument that goes back to our natural defenses versus the toll that it takes to develop a drug. All of this is decisions that I make in my life have a bearing. The environment has a bearing on the way that I make decisions. So if I am equipped with things that would help me deal with a problem like coronavirus versus the insane amount of money and resources that will go into them developing a vaccine, I think that that's a consideration, and there's an environmental risk there, and I think that that's something that can be taken into consideration. I have some other reasons listed here, but I'll just say one last one, and I think it can be a strong argument, and it can be taken right from the pro-choice argument. Should a person have the right to control their body, or should the government have the right? And that would be an interesting discussion to have. All of this I'm talking about is mandatory vaccinations. So mandatory vaccinations is what I'm talking about. Taking it back to last week, and when I wrote this down, at our virtual Easter service on Sunday, which would have been 2 weeks ago, the pastor asked a question: what are you most concerned about today? And I thought my answer was something along the lines of concern for the poor and disenfranchised. But as I thought about it a little bit longer, I came up with a scarier conclusion. I think my biggest concern today is that the government and government science will be responsible for us. And you can throw in society for that matter. I don't see them working for the health and well-being of others most of the time. So the way that I look at mandatory vaccination is that if the healthcare industry and the government isn't looking out for your best interest in terms of your health or aiding you, then you have to take it upon yourself to do that. And I think that there's many ways that you can do that. There's many ways that you can help to support a healthy immune system that's both exercising your body as well as your mind. And what you can do is you can find people that have struck a good balance in their lives, and you can ask them for advice. I think reading the right things has something to do with that. I think stretching, exercise, being out in nature and outside helps with all of that. From Viktor Frankl's book, The Afterword, in that I posted something on Facebook about it, but there is some direct ties from psychoneuroimmunology that show that positive attitude and positive thoughts have a direct relationship to your immune system. So what I'm proposing is you don't need mandatory vaccinations. Those people who are scared that something like COVID-19 or a coronavirus will have detrimental health effects on their lives, they should get the vaccination. I'm not an anti-vaccination person. I'm just simply saying in this case, I would rather trust my body, and I'm confident that my body is fully capable of handling such a thing. And so by supporting a healthy immune system, I think that I'm doing the best that I can, and I don't want to be forced to get a vaccination. Hopefully you think that a few of the things that I talked about are reasonable. We'll have to see how the pandemic continues to go, and then we'll be able to look back on it and evaluate how we handled it. Obviously make any things in the future try and learn from our mistakes, also learn from the things that, the new things that we found out, and hopefully lead to a happier, healthier America. I guess that's all I got. Carry on.